Dear listener, all paths have led to this moment. Fate, destiny. At your ears' fingertips lay the secrets of 1,000 adventures, keys to unimaginable power. Will you take it? Will you match the stare of the abyss, staring at you, staring at it, staring at you, staring at...
Hey man, what's going on here?
Did you take all the candles again?
That's fun.
That is worse than getting caught watching porn. Welcome to Roll Havoc. Today, the cast is excited to give you a look under the hood of our longest campaign, Eberron in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. We'll take a bit of a deep dive into what made this campaign so special and share cast insight into that experience. I am your host, Jack Steelman, or Sean, either one. What's in a name, right? Jack is more of a gamer tag these days. My friends call me Sean. They'll call me either one over the course of the episode. But for now, let me introduce, he's our resident megalomaniac because he controls our worlds and our hearts, but mostly our worlds. It's my friend and the group DM, Ben Grunzel.
Hi, my name's Ben, and I'm a control freakaholic.
Also with us, he's 8 feet tall and here to eat all 7 of those cakes. It's my pleasure to introduce one of my other best friends, Josh Plotkin.
I know what they're asking. Why 7 and not 8? Well, you'll have to keep listening to find that
out. So today we're going to be talking about the Eberron campaign. And so this was one that we started online over Roll20 in, I think, 2016. We were all, I think, in the middle of moving, if not already moved from Savannah or Jacksonville out to Seattle or Denver, Colorado. So we're all just kind of spread out all over the place. It was my first time playing a campaign online. I'm really happy with the way it all came together.
Same here.
It came really well. Before this, we had played a whole bunch of one-shots, I think, together. We had done some like linked adventures that kind of never really took off, but it was really, we knew each other's like play style to that point. So to jump in, I kind of want to set the groundwork. Ben, I want you to kind of give us the layout of why you chose Eberron, why we wanted to do this setting, and what drew you to write the story you did. Like, what were the elements that you really liked about Eberron that kind of led us towards this campaign?
Yeah, so Eberron came out, I believe, in 2004, and at first I was like, oh great, they're just got another, fantasy D&D setting. And then I flipped through it and I'm like, oh, this is actually different. Like, everything was really fresh. It had all the elements of 3rd edition D&D, but with an interesting twist on it and a cool world that was a little bit better suited for like modern storytelling. So I've played it a lot since it came out. I played it in college, after college. I've played it with Josh in at least one previous campaign. I was interested in running again. I run about half homebrew and half published settings when I run campaigns, and for Eberron's probably my number one campaign setting, and then Ravenloft to be like close second. But so yeah, I was excited to run. I was thinking about some cool Eberron appropriate stuff.
Yeah, the tagline for Eberron is that it's pulp fantasy, and anything you can do in Dungeons and Dragons you can do in Eberron, and I think that's a really huge draw for it. Personally, I had never played Eberron. I had never played an Eberron. I had never looked into the campaign setting before I played with you guys. So I'm coming from the opposite side of that. So Josh, you played in a campaign with Ben before this. What do you like about Eberron? Like, what draws you to that?
Well, I actually been playing in Eberron since it came out, because it came out during college and it was bright and new. My friends really liked the idea that alignments didn't matter anymore, and then basically it just threw me into that world, and I actually learned a lot of it actually through playing. So it feels like really earned knowledge because I didn't read the book first. But I think what drew me to the setting is is really the fact that there is just so much Indiana Jones-esque action adventure awaiting for you, regardless in the direction that you go in. You know?
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's so you look at when the Rising from the Last War came out in 2019 for 5th edition, like the cover of it is a Warforged pulling it like a train heist. Like it really kind of just is ingrained that like pulp fantasy, anything that came out from like 80s 90s type storytelling and fantasy style is really really kind of neat and ingrained into that. So I've really enjoyed that. So that's why we're playing in Eberron. Ben, what story? Let's set us up for a story. So what were the elements that you drew into this campaign? Where did you want to go? How did you want to start? And then we'll kind of go from there and talk about how the characters we made fit into it.
Yeah, I didn't have too much like set in mind because I've learned that it's usually better to see what the players want to do and help build that, or build the campaign around what they're interested in. And there's lots of stuff to explore in Eberron, so stuff's kind of wide open. I had originally pictured a little bit more like Cold War-esque stuff because there's like 5 nations that are kind of in a stalemate after a huge war. And I'd been watching Hunt for Red October and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, this would be some cool stuff, to, like some spy type stuff. And then you guys threw me a curveball with the characters that you came up with. It's like, okay, well, that's, these are cool ideas. So let's kind of roll with that and do something different. I knew I wanted to do something with the Emerald Claw, which is like the disgraced necromancer guard of Karnath that are basically like terrorists, and they're kind of like the stand-in for like Indiana Jones style Nazis in the setting. Like they're questing for lost artifacts for power, and you can pretty much guarantee that when them and their undead minions show up, you can just kill them without having to think twice about it. So that's an easy starting point.
It is nice to have that kind of like triggers, like, oh hey, look, the bad guys are here. If we try diplomacy, great. If we don't, start blasting. It's all right.
Yeah, so that's really the starting point. And cool. After that, it kind of spun off with what you guys wanted to do, and then I had ideas that I incorporated as the campaign went on. But like honestly, starting it off, I didn't have the final arc of the I didn't really have the arc of the campaign pre-planned.
Yeah, and I definitely we're going to get into the story arc and how we progressed from we started at level 5. We took the characters from this campaign from level 5 all the way to level 20. And one thing I'll go ahead and mention now about that is I really appreciate that not only did we get to level 20, but you let us play around at level 20 for a little while before we closed the campaign out. So that was really fun. Josh, so you played a zealot barbarian, and I want you to tell me about Rurik. Give us the intro to this epic character that we ran through Eberron.
Rurik Gashfordok, the Anointed, Eater of Cake 7. There was only about 2 of his names, right?
He had thousands.
Yeah, he had thousands.
Yeah,
he really had so many at the end, but he ended as the Persistent, which is great. So the best I could say is that I had played Eberron so many times and knew so much about the setting by the time I played this game. It was really important to me that I didn't play something that I played before. And I played things like Gatekeeper Druids, Changeling Rogue Wizard that worked as an Inquisitor in Sharn, Delker Half-Blood Sorcerer that was an Assassin, Warforged Monk, and then also a Were-Tiger Barbarian. And Rurik's decision to be really comes down to that Were-Tiger Barbarian, because that was the first game I ever played in. And the idea was that my character was lycanthrope royalty that were run out of the regular plane of existence by the Silver Flame. And as we all know, the Silver Flame were kind of dicks to the lycanthropes and purged them all off existence. So, my DM went in a different story, made me basically royalty, but then he pulled the whole thing where my king got slaughtered and they were taken over by a more militaristic sect of lycanthropes, and they wanted to wage war back on Rakeworth. So in the end, I like that. I mean, this is a long story, obviously, but that character basically ended up fighting for the Silver Flame so he could get his throne back. And in doing so, they were so nice. They had so many resources. They gave our characters like an airship, and they were like, you should go to the Demon Wastes. There's a tribe of followers that are very similar to the Silver Flame. If we need backup, you could go there and ask them. So we went and we asked them. They politely declined, of course. But just as cinematically would go during a giant fight, you see an airship coming back. It's all of them. No one knows how to control the airship. Person screaming, and it crashes into the ground, kills everybody on board, destroys the castle. It's awful.
This is the worst.
we lived through this war, and the whole thing is we promised that if they come and help us, we would come back and help them. So we lived through this war, and we didn't go back and help them. You see, they sent all their warriors to die, and we didn't go help. So Rurik is the culmination of me feeling awful about that experience on my first game, and making basically a character that was like, I know these ones, I know what they're like. Let's make this work. Let's make a hero for them and play them right. So it was a lot of respect to that. You know, I also wanted to make something that was self-sufficient, because I knew there's only two of us. And I was like, this guy starts off as nigh unkillable as it can get with the highest hit die. Let's make it work. And he just kind of evolved from there.
Yeah. So talk to me about like Rurik Thar's backstory in that context then. So he's this orc from the Demon Wastes, member of the Gashkala, right? And this is the tribe of demon hunters that has hunted demons in the Demon Waste for
Rakshasas specifically.
Rakshasas specifically. So this orc barbarian who is just filled with the Binding Flame, which is not, it's the Silver Flame, but it's not the Silver Flame. We went through that conversation.
It's the Silver Flame.
It's the same thing, but it's not
the same power source.
Yeah.
It like predates the Silver Flame is kind of like the almost like Catholic Church stand-in for the setting, and the binding, but the source of it has been around since like the age of dragons. So the binding technically the Gashkala orcs are an older tradition than the Church of the Silver Flame.
They are. It's Tiramaran and all the other spirits of the Coatls sacrifice themselves to bind the immortal demon lords, basically. The Lords of Dust. Yeah.
And so Rurik is this champion among these people who is destined to just consistently be reborn whenever the tribe needs a hero. And so that's why he ends up having thousands of names over the course of his life. And I think that's really neat.
I love him. Honestly. I still do to right now.
Why a barbarian?
Well, so there were a lot of other options, right? But for some reason, the visual I always wanted was a orc with lots of scars, pulled back hair and crop top, basically looking like a shirtless samurai, but you're wielding a great axe. That was the look I wanted to go for. Yeah. And that class just lines up exactly
it's pretty great.
Better than a samurai does, honestly.
For orcs, I think it's like, no, that I totally get that visual. That's pretty great.
He's a half orc. And by the way, you said Rurik Thar before. That would be the magic card that he's named after.
My mistake. I've heard you say it so many. I've gotten my face beat in so many times by that freaking card. Sometimes. I apologize.
Scarred you for life.
I also want to recognize the source.
It deserves it.
It definitely does. It's such a cool connection. I think it's really neat. To talk about Rurik, and then so you have this zealot barbarian living in the Demon Waste, and then we have the character that I played, which was Bakarum Paxson Dovelkurs, which is this dragonborn paladin. So when I made this character, we talked about going into Eberron. It was actually the first time I was getting to really play 5th edition. So I was looking through the 5th edition PHB and realized that the Dragonborn were a race. And I was like, okay, that's really fucking cool. So we're talking about Eberron, and you guys are like, well, Dragonborn are kind of like iffy, and this, like, it was in 3rd edition. So like as a player race, they weren't really in there yet. And I was just like, okay, well, I just want to play like a Dragonborn paladin of Bahamut. And so we're like, we'll make it work. And so when I started looking into the Eberron Campaign setting in third edition you guys had sent, I found the section about the old dragon gods, Bahamut, Tiamat, the other 11. And I was like, well, that's what I want. I want like a paladin of Bahamut. And it's just like, well, they don't really call into Eberron too much. But what there is this draconic prophecy that's intrinsic to like all of the events that are happening on Eberron. And it just has to do with the earth, the stars, the underworld, like all this really cool stuff. And it just like, it seemed like a really neat device for me to use as a person who knows nothing about this campaign setting, to play a character who is discovering everything about this campaign setting through the eyes of this mysterious draconic prophecy that has no real firm details. And I thought that was really neat. We came up with this story where he was one of 13 siblings that were experiments made by the Chamber on Arganessen. The Chamber is this group of dragons who just study the draconic prophecy and try to influence it and use it for their own purposes. They're all very mysterious. No one knows what the dragons are really up to. So we have this paladin who is exiled from his homeland because he's the runt, and he kills his brother over a power struggle before the campaign even starts. And so he's kind of sent off on a pilgrimage into the land of mortals from the dragons to find his purpose and his place in this draconic prophecy. And he has this tome of the sovereigns, which is his icon for his class spec. He has a paladin oath of devotion subclass. And so we have this zealot barbarian who is dead set on killing all the Rakshasa in the entire spread of Eberron. And we have this paladin who is not even sure what he's devoted to and what his faith is in, but it has been granted power to influence for the good of the mortals of Eberron. So we threw all that at Ben and said, catch.
which realistically are like super epic stories for Eberron. I mean, even knowing going into it was going to be a little over the top, and he just handled it like a champ.
Yeah. And I think that was even, we came up with these backstories. And I think I had spent like a half a day writing up just like a page after I had done my research, and I sent it to you guys. And it was like, I think I could write a book with how much this, like how inspired I was to write this. And then like 2 weeks later, I started writing my book, and I'm still writing it. So, so we have the characters and we have this set up. So we started this game at level 5. We played for a few levels, and so that's the characters. And let's talk a little bit on our play style too, going into Eberron.
And real quick,
yeah,
I just wanted to say, like, so yeah, like, you know, I was thinking of like this, the main continent that all the stuff in the Eberron books focuses on is Corvair, one of the 4 big continents, and it has like 5 nations that have been around for a long time that just recently split up after a civil war, and then it's got a few like little, you know, pockets of like more wilderness, and then on the far western side, past a mountain range, there's the Demon Waste, where just nobody ever goes because it's full of Rakshasas and all this evil influence and orcs that guard it and try to keep all the Rakshasas from leaving. And then there's another continent full of dragons that nobody goes to because it's full of dragons and they don't like visitors.
We're sensing a pattern.
So yeah, like you guys picked like the 2 like most outside of like, you know, the politics and even just the normal goings on of Eberron as you possibly could. And it's like, well, but like you said, it was a good excuse to explore the setting from there, because you guys are both kind of outsiders. And, you know, even if I had like a political thing in mind to begin with, I'm also a huge Conan fan. So like the idea of like the barbarians coming into civilization and being like, your ways seem simple and weak, which is pretty much how you reacted to most things. So it was a lot of fun.
It was great. So we have these 2 epic characters who are aligned on their backstory and their goals for what they expect out of these adventures. And we talk about player types, and I know I usually end up being a little bit more of an actor and a role player, and Josh ends up being just a little bit more of an optimizer and the machinist.
Still love role play though.
Still love
Yeah,
role
you
playing.
guys
Oh,
reached
but,
like 60-40, like just in opposite ways, but
Yeah,
you guys
yeah,
both
we
marry role playing and mechanics really well.
and that works out to our benefit. And I think when we got to what was the name of that temple in that forgotten city?
Hackatorvik?
Hakatorvak, the one where we found Asterio.
No, so that was oh shoot, what was the name of
Lanka.
that?
Lanka.
Lanka, thank you.
Lanka. Thank you.
Lanka.
Yeah, that was in
there
the
were
Demon
so
Waste.
many
Yeah.
old cities
Yeah.
in
How many
in
how many
Waste.
temples did we raid?
Yeah.
Don't even talk to me about Kabara. So in Lanka, we found Asterio. And I think now that you mention it, that's probably where you were able to get that espionage and political influence and inspiration that you had out, because Trevor comes in playing the party rogue, the changeling, who was pretty much, we weren't even convinced that character existed because the hide checks were so ridiculously high.
Because his
So
stealth and disguise were just off the
And
charts.
if anyone has never heard of a changeling, they're pretty much just the best race ever made for anything interaction. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
basically it. Half doppelgangers, doppelganger blooded or whatever. It's
so right, and so Asterio comes in as
Changing
this
faces.
agent of the Royal Eyes from Onder, who is this pretty much this espionage agent who had gotten caught on a mission to Lanka, and we freed. And then they were pretty much told to keep an eye on us for a little while, and then also use us as a resource. And we ended up as like, no, like our activities are an interest of Onder, so like send this agent with us, and we'll like do some good stuff. So that was really cool. You got a little bit of that political intrigue, and of course, it's playing with Trevor is of course super fun. We definitely know that Trevor is great at role playing. Definitely have a lot of fun role playing, and he also really likes to optimize a rogue. Like that was so much fun.
Yeah.
And he was a good foil to you guys because like just in terms of class, you guys were very upfront, showy, very direct, like we're here to kill demons and chew bubble gum and we're all out of bubble gum. And he was his character Asterio was the ultimate like magic super spy. Like we kept joking that he was his stealth check was so good hiding behind you guys in combat that you weren't even sure if he was in the room or not. Also, he was just kind of typical rogue, like out for gold, out for himself. That developed a lot over the course of the campaign, and he took on more responsibility. But
I recall it was like at level 17 was the first time that I referenced my character actually talking directly to him. It's like to like actually be like, okay, you are here, right? And because I wouldn't put it past the crazy barbarian to be like, yeah, things are just exploding around me. It works. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, occasionally this floating hand shows up out of nowhere every once in a while, but other than that.
Because he had great. I can't remember if it was a feat or if he just made a good enough stealth check that basically he stayed hiding even after making ranged magic attacks. So for all you guys knew, there's just firebolts going off from nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
in the darkness.
That's pretty
especially because they came from his mage hand because of the arcane trickster thing. So they came from different directions all the time.
Yeah. So we have these three characters that we used to propel this story along. So Ben, when you got all these characters' backstories and you got the Holy Raging Barbarian, the copper scaled dragonborn who ends up going to like a platinum scale dragonborn, you have this changeling espionage super spy. When you get all these stories and you have this campaign kind of already like fleshed out, like how did that story evolve? How many wrenches did we throw first off from level 5 to level 20? But how was that experience of like crafting a story? Did we make it easy?
Yeah, honestly, it was really easy to just kind of springboard what to do next based off of what you guys were interested in. And if I had, an idea for, because part of Eberron is like traveling around and new settings all the time, like you're, like a Bond film or an Indiana Jones movie. So you're seeing new interesting adventure locations all the time. So sometimes there's a little like, slight tug for you guys in a certain direction and you're always game for it. So, but in terms of like using your backstories, I think this is probably the campaign where I used player backstory and built on it more than anything I'd done previously. I grew up like, exposed to a lot of older edition stuff, and that there's that kind of mindset of like, I've created this world in this dungeon and I don't care what characters you bring to it, you're exploring my world and that's what we're doing. Like, I don't care about your backstory kind of mentality that can be kind of limiting. Like we weren't doing just a dungeon crawl. So I kind of evolved a lot of what can I throw in based off of it. So like, I started throwing in Durakan's family members, some of his other siblings showing up in strange places. I started doing more with Rurik's tribe, and they became a big part of the campaign later, slowly developing a little bit of the political stuff through Asterio's connections because he was basically a spy for you mentioned the Royal Eyes are like the spy network for the nation that specializes the most in magic. So they're very like focused on divination and stuff like that. So that was easy to throw in stuff, but so much stuff just happened organically with, we'd have an adventure somewhere and you guys would talk to somebody unexpected and it's like, okay, well, let's go with that. I think there's a lot of times where you guys apologize for throwing a wrench in stuff where you didn't need to, because it wasn't a wrench. It was just like, this is how the game goes.
I think the prime example of that is probably going to end up being the B squad, the B team. When we start talking about that, because it wasn't like, that wasn't necessarily like a wrench per se, but it was just kind of a cool offshoot. Durakan coming in and all of those siblings of Bakaram coming in to kind of get into the adventure. And we had so many fun spinoffs for that. That was so much fun.
I feel like we should go into that a little bit.
For sure.
Now's a good time. Yeah.
So, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, just the short of it was that during a confrontation with Lady Ilmero, who is one of like the leader of the Emerald Claw, and you guys were not high enough level to take her on, but you tried. And you also didn't realize it was her right away. She used her breath weapon, knocked Bakaram to, I said Durakan earlier, that's your other character, knocked Bakaram to 0 hit points, and her breath weapon immediately turns you into a zombie because it's infused with necromantic magic. So now your character's dead.
One of the best parts of this game, by the way. Like, so legitimately one of the best parts of this game.
Yeah. So you created a second. Oh, and apologies for doing that on your birthday.
That's the best birthday present I could ask for. What are you talking about?
But you created a secondary character to like, it's like Bakaram will come back. We're going to work on that. Like, you guys kind of had to do a quest to find somebody to resurrect him, because it's harder to resurrect somebody who's been turned undead, and high level magic on Eberron is rare. You have to search out hidden stuff. So as part of that, you created a new character, a fighter that we kind of customized some stuff for. And then after Bakaram came back, it was like, well, would you guys want to do a one shot with Durakan and a couple of the other siblings? Because we didn't have all the siblings accounted for, and you guys were like, I'd love to create a 15th level character for no reason.
It's funny because I still don't have all of those siblings accounted for.
No, we still didn't use all of them.
So if we want to do future spin-offs,
they're like the blue wizards in Middle Earth. They're just off doing their own thing and don't care.
I've forgotten their names already.
One of them opened up a pastry shop. One of them just lounged on a beach.
It was Durakan. He opened up a pastry shop.
It was Durakan after everybody else retired. Yeah. So, and then those guys ended up, it worked out so well that we just kind of, okay, now we have 6 characters and 3 players, and just kind of kept rearranging the party for different quests, sometimes very Final Fantasy-esque.
That was that was so great.
It made the whole like epic tier of the campaign just so much more dynamic, because now there's like double the characters and options for split. I could split you guys up and run you on more adventures. Ironically, I was trying to kind of wrap up the campaign at that point and ended up slowing it down a lot, because now we're going on twice the adventures for you guys to level up.
Oh no, more adventure.
It was it worked out great.
Yeah. Well, and that has to be, I think that's a good kind of launching point to talk about some very specific and special elements of this campaign that set it apart from other D&D games that we've played in the past. So one of them is the B Squad. At around level 15, we introduced 3 new PCs that were different classes, but related to each other. So we had Duracon, the fighter. We gave him a custom feat to where he was large size. And so that was kind of a neat addition. And then we had his whole thing was like, he was this, I made him almost like a Ronin type. He was this weapons master and battle master that had been sent to learn all of these secret techniques. We never really got into like his backstory. He learned all of these like secret swordsman techniques from across Eberron before he actually made it back to Corvair to meet up with Bakram's party. So that's where he was. And he's this huge red scaled dragonborn with a giant flaming thumb sword fighter. And he's ridiculous. And it was super fun to play. He was very blunt, upfront, chaotic, good type, who was honestly just trying to like save his brother. But then we considered him like the oldest. He was the big brother type, but he had a twin sister who was a purple scaled dragon. And Josh, do you want to go into her?
Oh yeah, that's Cadillac-Striax. Maybe a joke on Cataclysm and dragons have like 20 syllable names, so I just went with it. But yeah, she was purple scaled because she was a dragon-blooded sorcerer, red dragon-blooded, but then she was a blue dragonborn, so she was purple scaled. And I basically made her as if Bakram was to Bahamut, then she was to, I think, I actually can't even remember the name of that god, but it's dragon god like Garrix or something like that, but it's the dragon god of storm.
Garrix. Yeah, Garrix.
Yeah. It's the dragon god of storm. So I made her all based off of like, all she was damage output in forms that made sense for her colors. So she had all the feats that could let you do extra damage or those things. And then she teleported a lot. And so I wanted to make her like flippant, airy.
Much to our benefit.
Oh, much to our benefit.
There going to be stories about that too.
The idea is that she took everything. She took decisions, encounters, situations like a lightning bolt to her. That's how she made her decisions. Whatever it was, it's that, and it's aggressively that in that direction.
That's pretty cool.
Cared about her brothers and siblings because she was like the older one. I remember she loved Bakram because they were the older, bigger dragon, the red dragons, and which of course biggest wrong.
Yeah, we kind of developed, I think, even with Trezix, which was the other fighter dragonborn that Trevor played. Trezix, and his whole thing, he was a lawful good fighter, dex fighter. He had been a street level hero in Sharn for a while, and that was like we never got to. He had like a background, like a Batman type background that we never really kind of dug into, but it was so cool. We had these 3 characters, and that was just such a neat addition to the campaign. It offered us such a wider scope, bigger breadth of what we could do. And another that really fed into, at that point, some of the other really cool things we had done with the campaign. We had erected a fortress. We had our own fortress in Droam, right? We had an airship that allowed us pretty much instant travel for like anywhere we wanted to go, unless Ben wanted to use it for adventure hooks. And so we had transported like this airship that was also like a submarine. Yeah. And so it was just like, we had such a cool mode of transportation for that. What are some other things that we had some really good homebrew rules, I think, around character creation. We did feats for some level, we did extra feats at a few levels. We did
feats and ability score improvements.
Yes.
Yeah. And we were allowed to use feats that were like, we started in Rent so long, like we used feats that were fixed. but like the character had been running with that feat for long enough, so
Right.
we just kept it in that broken ass form that it was.
There were some unearthed arcana feats that we had
Mhm.
picked up before they had become official wizards canon. So that was
Mhm.
really fun. I know like for myself, I used a couple of the Dragonborn racial feats. I gave Bakram wings at one point. That was really
Yep.
neat. What were some other ones that?
We also like we played war games in this one, which dealt with
Yeah.
like, because we had the keep, we had these armies that we could do things with, and that came up a few times, and that was actually pretty fun, especially around like the third or fourth time when we actually understood the rules.
Yeah. So Ben, Ben, where
Yeah.
did those? Where did you come up with the rules for that overarching like it was like a war game mechanic? Where did those rules come from, and how did we get that set up?
Yeah, that was from the Strongholds and Followers supplement from MCDM Productions. It gave you like you could develop a stronghold, which gave the characters who ran the stronghold special abilities, like you kind of like become one with the land, and it empowers you. The land reacts as well. Like there was like minor kind of mostly aesthetic like quality, like things that change in the land around you, but also gave you army units. Story wise, like you guys defeated some demon worshipping minotaurs in Droam, and the hags that run Droam, the daughters of Sorakel, were like, hey, if you want to take over their stronghold and kind of normalize trade relations with the neighboring, you guys do it. And Burrick was like, cool, I'm going to call my cousins, and like hundreds of orcs showed up to help hold the castle down.
I remember this boss fight, right? We go into was it Tarakbar's Fist? We go in, and it's this stronghold, and I hate that stereotype of being a paladin where it's just like, like I'm lawful good, but that honestly means I'm lawful kick ass. So like I hate that archetype of paladin. So I remember going into this thinking like, all right, I want to like be semi-diplomatic. I want to be like the good, like shining knight type of paladin. And like I want to like offer them a chance to surrender. I want them to like do all this. But then we get into this like boss fight, and Ben's just like, nah, dude, they're like summoning a demon right now.
Yeah, these are not nice guys. Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, well then let's fucking kick it. Let's kick ass. Let's do it. I'm here for it.
that was the switch for the party. If a demon was involved, it was go time.
And I was like, yeah, no, that's it. Like that's all you need to say.
Well,
That's
it's
it.
eternal evil. We were eternal good. We must combat.
Yeah, so that was fun, and it kind of got used in a few different adventures over time, including like a big, closer to the end of the campaign, like this big battle with the forces of the Emerald Claw in the Demon Wastes, like Lady Ilmero trying to finish a ritual at the city of Lanka where you originally had found Trevor, Trevor's character like 14 levels earlier. So
that was a nice little tie-in. So and there was a lot, and we definitely, it was nice that we did kind of dig into elements of each character's backstory. It was present throughout the entire campaign. It wasn't, I think there were a lot of elements where the story was moved along kind of along the draconic prophecy, but we did get into a lot of the demon wastes. We did talk a lot about, we actually used, I thought it was really cool how we used a lot of the Gashkala and the backstory for Rurik and the backstory for Asterio in Droam, and through the binding hold and through establishing our own fortress and going through these armies, and that's kind of where that political intrigue started to come in. And that was around level, we had that for a while. That had to be like around like level 12
10 or 12, somewhere in there. Yeah, it was like half the campaign that you guys had a hold, and this was in Droam, which is like the monster nation that's not even officially recognized as a nation by the other 5 kingdoms. So it kind of allowed you to be like a power, but still be barbarians, still be the outsiders, because the other kingdoms didn't take you seriously. And technically you're working for 3 hags, which again, if you were playing lawful stupid, you'd be like, no, we have to fight these obviously more powerful than us hags instead of cooperating with them, but your presence helped calm down Droam and calm down, like, it's because kind of like a thing that developed was like a demon trying to provoke war between the different nations, and part of that was trying to provoke something along the border of Droam, and you guys settled that down and eventually took out the demons. I mean, overall, you guys had a peaceful effect.
That was a very hard fight.
Yeah,
that was
hard one.
And we also, I feel like we kind of played around with the theme of like, what really makes a monster, because like Droam's full of monsters mostly because, well, they're ogres and trolls and stuff like that. They must be monsters, but like, are they really that bad? I mean, are they any worse than the humans who are there's humans that do awful things too. So
yeah, and I think that also spoke to the characters, right? We didn't have a human or a dwarf or anything pretty in that party. Really, we had a changeling, we had a monstrous dragonborn, we had this half orc that's covered in like scars and like
but by the time we were there, I was already like growing freaking scales and multicolored feathers out of my hair and stuff. Yeah, so it was,
so and
not normal.
There's a lot about this campaign, I think, that was particularly special. We had all these really neat story elements. We had a secondary party to mix and match with. We had the fortress, we had the airship, we had the war games. There was also some of the homebrew that we do for like combat, for the character generation. We talked a little bit how like, okay, we threw in extra feats because that was a really neat thing in 3rd edition. I remember exactly like having that conversation because I was making a character for the first time outside of 3rd edition, and I was just like, do we still get feats? And Ben was like, yeah, then why not? Because their feats are fun. Feats are cool. And I was just like, all right, cool. I didn't realize that in 5th edition, that's a big deal. Like feats in 5th edition, and it's not that the feats in 5th edition are necessarily like overpowered or powerful. It's that like everything in 5th edition is meant to be a little more chill than 3rd edition. And we still had a lot of flexibility to do awesome stuff. And I think that was we got to a point later on where we justified through story means giving up some of those powers and giving up some of those features, so we can kind of make it to where like things didn't get lost in the shuffle of mechanics, and that was really cool.
Yeah, that I learned a lot about how far you can push 5th edition from this campaign, because in 3rd edition giving people lots of feats wasn't that big of a deal. In 5th edition, feats are more powerful. They're optional. So giving you guys feats and ability score improvements made you guys a lot more powerful in that way. Like certain feats, like mobility, just gives you so much more stuff you can do in combat. Also, I gave you guys lots of magic items. Again, like coming from a 3rd edition mindset, it was like, well, yeah, you guys are this level, you should all have lots of bonus items. And also, I like throwing magic items at low level characters because you never know how long a campaign's going to last, and you want cool stuff to happen.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, we're in this for the long haul, and you guys are 12th level, and you're hitting way above where you should be. You're just your mobility, your attack, damage, everything was kind of off the charts.
Yeah.
And it was kind of becoming a struggle to challenge you guys. And I'm pretty non-confrontational, and Josh was a great friend and player, and kind of knew that it was bothering me and talked to you guys, and you guys kind of came to me as like, hey, what do we need to do to scale this back a little bit? And we compromised on some stuff. I also just had to learn how to make things more powerful in 5th edition.
Yeah.
Extra damage and more monsters. That's the secret. I mean, seriously, there's lots of different dials you can pull, and like throwing higher attack bonuses or higher level monsters isn't it. You just got to bump up damage a little bit, throw more monsters just to kind of split you guys up.
I don't think we mentioned fast turns and slow turns.
No. So, and that I wanted to get into that. So like some of the homebrew mechanics that we did, that's like, so some of the homebrew stuff was the extra feats. the extra abilities, some of the abilities that we actually did were homebrew too, like giving Duracon large size. That's not anywhere in 5th edition really.
Nope. Still is not. They do
Still
not
is
give.
not, yeah. Well, because if you played it in 3rd edition, you could fucking break the game by making something large size.
And Duracon with a higher damage greatsword that also did fire damage, and being a fighter where you got 3 attacks per round, 6 if you action surged.
Yeah.
I remember him doing like 130 points of damage in one round if he went Nova. So yeah,
and
it was kind of broken. But
yeah, and that's
that's why you guys fought 2 undead dragons in that one fight instead of just 1.
That's why he held the line against those 2 red dragons, those 2 undead dragons.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's talk about
combat. Can't one-shot a boss if there's 2 bosses.
Yeah. Now, and Josh, I'm really glad you brought this up, the fast turns and slow turns, because it is, every time I mention this rule to other people who play D&D, they're like, what? That is heresy. You don't roll for initiative. You don't play D&D if you don't roll for initiative. Here's the funny thing, guys. We still say roll for initiative.
It's inherent to the game.
We still make jokes about alignment, even though Eberron doesn't focus on alignment. So yeah.
But so fast and slow turns, that is a concept that Ben got from, where did you get that concept from, Ben?
From Shadow of the Demon Lord, from Robert Schwab. Is he who worked on 5th edition and I think 3rd and 4th edition in Warhammer Fantasy, and this is his own custom game, Shadow of the Demon Lord.
So the way fast and slow turns work is we have pretty much 2 segments to every round of combat. And every hero and every heroes go first, and then villains go second, or bad guys go second. And then you have fast turns, and then the options that go on a slow turn. So it's like if you're taking 1 action, that is a fast turn. So if you're moving, or if you're attacking, or if you're casting a spell, and that's all you're doing, if you're not moving and attacking, that's a fast turn. If you are moving and attacking, that's a slow turn. So, and we can obviously clear this up if I'm not explaining it well, but so you have and so instead of rolling initiative, we talk for a second as a party, like, all right, who's going to be taking a fast turn, who's going to like fire off a shot, and then who's going to be taking a slow turn to like move and move up. And then we have to be willing to kind of anticipate what the villains are going to do through their fast and slow turns based on their positioning. So it's really kind of neat. And so what did you guys like about this system, and what kind of advantages and disadvantages does it give us as a group playing D&D?
I know specifically why I like it. It's for 2 reasons. First one is that combat, each round is supposed to last 6 seconds, and the actions that are occurring are supposed to be concurrent, basically. So if it's supposed to be a representation of literally, well, here's what like an active fight looks like, right? That is very stretched with the way the initiative works, but the way that the fast turns and slow turns work, you can see it as, well, the heroes move, the monsters move, then the heroes move, and the monsters move. You can see it as more of a dance. So like for visual, like I guess visually in my head, it makes it so it's more pleasant that way. Second is that it makes me into a better player, because when you're rolling for initiative, all you wanted to do was to beat everybody else with your initiative roll. So to me, it's kind of was like an inherently little selfish bit. Whereas when it comes to fast turns and slow turns, I'm just like, what does everybody want to do? What do y'all want to do?
It makes us pick strategy, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so does it make sense for the fighter who's up front to just see if he can finish off that monster real quick before everyone else decides what they're going to do? Or does it make more sense for, someone to heal that fighter before he does what he's about to do, because it might end up with him getting killed? There's a lot of like, if I do this, what are you guys going to do? What's the best option? What should happen first this round?
The fighter can take that attack, and then if he did finish it off, the healer knows I don't have to use a healing spell now.
Right.
Because the threat is over. Yeah.
And that was really kind of a neat play to strategy. And I've said this before, and I think this is one thing I really kind of like to harp on as a player, is that like we are embodying at one point or another superhuman beings who have some sense of something that is going on that we cannot fathom. Okay. If I had a horde of zombies in front of me, I'd like to think I'd know what I would do, but if I had a horde of zombies in front of me and I was this holy warrior who could like swing light as justice, I don't know what the fuck I would get. What is my strategy there? So I like the idea that we can have an edge as players to strategize in these things that are kind of outside of what is actually like imaginable. So that's what I like about it, is that it gives us that edge, that advantage of, it makes us feel like heroes, but it also, when it doesn't work out in our favor, it is such a cool effect. And I kind of want I want you to talk about what it's like on the DM side, going fast and slow turns, and how that makes you set up an encounter, and how that makes you react to like what we're doing.
Yeah, like you guys are saying, it encourages cooperation among the players. Like, you guys have to strategize how you're going to do every turn. You have to strategize how you do every turn, and it's not just, okay, it's not my turn, I'm not going to pay attention to what's going on, because that's what happens in a lot of games with the typical initiative system. So it keeps everybody more engaged. You think about it, what everybody's doing more. On a practical side, I'm cursed on initiative rolls anyway, so I don't mind the monsters going second on each phase because they would anyway. At least if the monster's only attacking, it has a chance of going on a fast turn. And there was times where somebody would have to, like, if I to get over there, it'll take a slow turn to get over there and attack somebody, but they're going to attack this guy, one of the other characters, and drop them right now. So instead, I'll throw a ranged weapon, even though it's not my most powerful attack, or something like that. Stuff like that came up, and it felt more realistic because, instead of like, the ogre standing over the fallen, hero about to smash him with his club, and suddenly a character 120 feet away just walks over and then attacks him 2 times before the ogre can do anything. It's like, how, it's too abstracted.
Yeah,
right.
And then get back. They also have to get back from the 120 feet in 6 seconds.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I also like that it changes the initiative order every round. Instead of having to roll initiative, keep track of that, whose turn is it, everybody's kind of checked out when it's not their turn. Everybody's doing something different on their turns, so it changes it up, and it just makes it feel a lot more dynamic. And it feels more like, when you're role playing a scene or when you're exploring something, you're not taking turns. Somebody wants to jump in and do something, they just do it however it makes sense, and it makes combat feel like that. And it makes it feel, there's something really gamey about rolling initiative and just sticking to your turns. It's like, are we playing Monopoly right now?
And you also look at there are just naturally classes in Dungeons and Dragons that are going to be more favored in initiative. The dex-based classes are going to be more favored in initiative. At least they were in 3rd edition, because to be quite honest, I haven't used initiative since we've been playing 5th edition. So
Good point.
But yeah, so the initiative system lends just kind of unfair advantages, especially if like you have a character back in 3rd edition, you could have a character that had improved initiative. It's like you literally take feats to excel at this one thing, because if you wanted to be the person who goes first every round, and it's just like, okay, well, if you don't go first in that combat, then you just wasted a fucking feat.
And it's also, it only matters in the first round of combat. After that, it's just everybody taking their turns, and it doesn't really matter anymore unless somebody gets killed before their first action or something like that.
I can also think of an example, where like everyone has that experience in a game where initiative rolls and 2 people agree to like either swap or delay, and then when that turn comes around, somebody wants to change their mind. And it's just this really crappy experience where it's just like, all right, strategy changed in the middle of combat because something else happened on someone else's turn, or I'm in a better position to do something else now, so I'm sorry you delayed your turn, or you delayed your initiative and you gave up that advantage, or whatever it was. It's just like, that's kind of a shitty thing to do in combat in general. So it's just like initiative kind of prompts people to behave in those ways, and it's like, that's not a very cohesive party mechanic at that point. It doesn't lend itself to people working together. It's like, no, I'm going to do what's best for my character on my turn because this is the only time I have to go. I have to get my time in. I have to do it like right now, right?
It makes sense in the way that like they want everything about this game is chance. Everything involves rolling a dice. So roll a dice to figure it out because that's how fate works. And so I always understood it from that concept, but it is very destructive, as we've just stated. Like it takes up too much space.
Yeah,
it takes up too much space.
Yeah.
I mean,
once we tried it out, we haven't gone back in any of the other one shots or campaigns we've done. So we like it a lot, obviously.
Not only that, we use it in the other games, Ben.
Yeah.
I want you to know, like we use it since,
and we recommend it to other players because it's like this is like one of the best things we've ever done for our D&D game.
And people are like, well, that's sacrilege. You don't roll for initiative. How do you, that's not Dungeons and Dragons. So there's, we have all these really cool parts of the Eberron campaign, these really cool elements of it that made it this sweeping epic tale of 3 heroes trying to rid the world of this scourge of demons and undead. And we went from level 5 to level 20, which was fantastic. And I think we could talk a little bit about like the experience of playing an epic level campaign. The really neat thing about, and we played this game from 2016 up until 2020. So it was about a 4.5 year campaign that we played.
There's some breaks in there.
With some breaks in there. Yeah. We took a few months off in between like huge levels and story steps to kind of, get into some other stuff. We played some one shots. As a matter of fact, we played a one shot with Bakram and Rurik with another set of one-shot characters that we had played from a previous one in like a dream sequence, and that was one of my favorite. That was honestly fun. That was such a cool little just like aside to the Eberron campaign with the side story about Vecna and all that. That was really neat. But we have all of these elements that we threw into this Eberron campaign that make it particularly special, and I can't wait to kind of dig into some of those a little bit more. Is there anything you guys want to talk about to give that feel of the Eberron campaign? What else was kind of like, any final words on what made that game particularly special? Josh, what did you like playing? What did you like about playing Rurik? Like, why did you keep playing that character for so long?
It was about the narrative that I was able to like create through the story. Cause like the whole idea of the Gashkala was that why he kept living is because their souls go back to Delur, which every soul does. But usually souls, they get wiped clean of their memories before they go back. Well, that's not what happens to their souls, right? They get held with the binding flame. But what made him special? And I was able to craft kind of the story about how the flame is made out of coatl souls, right? So that all of the mighty, all of the eternal ones that are like me, they're all the combination of a coatl spirit and a human spirit. And Bakram, working with Bakram, my character was able to basically hatch its daughter that's been trying to hatch for 10,000 years or hundreds of thousands of years. And I was able to build this story in the background, and I was able to make it so that like all the things that happened in my character, even the mechanics, kind of made sense towards this idea that he was becoming more and more cohesive with his immortal coatl soul, which by level 20, he then was exactly what I wanted to exist. And I had the idea. I was able to craft it and make it, and Ben allowed for it to happen, and the setting allowed for it to happen. And it made sense to have this epic holy warrior, eternal holy warrior, alongside the preternatural god of death. And
that's pretty neat. So I wanted to that point, by the end of the campaign, I wanted this dragonborn paladin. I had based him off of these old JRPG dragoon templates, right? He was a dragon knight. That's what I want. I wanted a dragon knight. He would leap up into the air and fall on his enemies with a lance. That was the dragoon JRPG archetype, and we did that. That was him. Like, by the end of it, he was this platinum scaled spear wielding monster of a knight. Ben, what about you? What were some great things, some final touches on this Eberron campaign. What made it so great for you?
I just liked that I was able to throw in some things, not knowing where they would end up, and riff on them with you guys and develop it. I think pretty early on I had that Coatl egg show up, and in Eberron, Coatl disappeared after like the big legendary battle against the demons, and like their souls formed the binding flame, which most people in Eberron don't even realize. And I just threw in like a Coatl egg that hatched when Bakram breathed on it, and you guys had a like baby Coatl following you around, and it's and it made sense with Rurik's backstory, and so that developed, and she got more powerful, and he kind of took on characteristics of a Coatl. And then I was doing a lot of stuff with like necromantic artifacts, and when Bakram died and then got resurrected, I had he talked to Lady Ilmero in Delure, which is like the afterlife plane in Eberron, because she had been killed and she's a lich, so she takes a few days to revive. He was waiting, hoping to get resurrected, so I would do these little like aside like conversations while the rest of the campaign was going on. And then when he got resurrected, he had the Mark of Death, which is the dragon marks in Eberron are like things that are in certain families, and they give like kind of low level practical magic to most of the houses. Like they created mercantile houses, but the Mark of Death deals with necromancy and contacting the dead, and was wiped out by the dragons and the elves. And Lady Ilmero was the ultimate form of the Mark, because she was half dragon, half elf with the Mark, and could take it in new places. And then she got killed and turned into a lich, and dragon marks don't work when you're dead. So all of a sudden Bakram shows up, and he has the Mark of Death. It's the first time it's been seen in like 1700 years. And I didn't have a plan for where that was going to go. Obviously, Lady Irma was not going to be happy about this, because she wants the control of the Mark of Death. And, so it kind of fit into her plans, but I just really liked how I was able to introduce story elements and let them develop organically and not force. I don't think anybody felt like they were railroaded, or they were
No,
just walking through a plot that I had predetermined. Like I was really going off of what you guys wanted to do, even up until the last session, the big climatic fight. I even gave Bakram like choices of like, you have control of the Mark of Death now. What do you want to grab it, or
that was
yeah,
and that was, I think, from start to finish. I think even Josh was probably about to say this, like there wasn't a single moment of this campaign where we felt railroaded.
Well, what I was about to say, if it was a railroad, then I'm in like the overnight class, super luxurious car. Like I got free service. There's food carts right there.
I think the proper definition of the railroad is when you're forcing the players to do something they don't want to do. But I hopefully didn't even feel like it was like heavily plotted, where you guys were like, if you want the campaign to be fun, you should do what the DM wants. Like I really was just riffing off what you guys were doing a lot of time. And I think Asterio got to flesh out a lot of stuff too, because he got to like, flex his political power and kind of become allied with Droam and become a political player, like a literal kind of player.
Hey.
That stuff happens.
Yeah. So there was a lot about this Eberron campaign that was particularly great, and we'll obviously have more time to go into detail about some of these aspects and elements that we've brought up today. This has been just a really nice chance to get a broad overview of this campaign, what made it so special, what made it so great, and why we want to talk about it so much. But I think now it's actually time to talk about some of our favorite stuff in a segment called Favored. So all of us have a lot of experience from older editions, from a long line of content that we have to talk about. And if there's one thing that tabletop RPGs love to do more than anything else, it is to print rule books. there are so many rule books. There are like thousands of tabletop RPG rule books out, if not millions of tabletop RPG rule books out there. And every single one of them has something in it to offer to the games that we're playing and everything that we're trying to do. So I want to talk to you two about what are your favorite rule books that have come out? What are your favorite aspects of them? And what do you like about them? And what do you bring from those books? Ben, let's start with you.
Yeah, a rule book I go back to a lot is just from the basic D&D set. I got the basic set that came out like in 1991, sometimes called the Black Box, that had a cool like learn how to play by yourself D&D thing. And the rule book in it is just, like a lot of the basic D&D line is just really good at like, here's 5 levels of characters. It gives you the basics of D&D, how to dungeon crawl. Here's some monsters, here's enough spells to get you started, and here's some tips for creating your own dungeons. And the artwork is great. It's just 30 or 40 pages of concentrated D&D that you can use over and over again. I mean, it's what got me started in opening up my imagination of what you could do with Dungeons and Dragons. And I still reference that book a lot just because, I mean, part of it's just nostalgia, but yeah, I think there's something to having something broken down into kind of the simplest form, a short rule book for a condensed version of the game, that is, because it kind of cuts out a lot of the overly flowery language or stuff I'm not going to use for my game. It's like, no, here's a short D&D rule book, go. So that's right. Another kind of honorable mention is the Fomori supplement for Werewolf the Apocalypse, which was my favorite of the World of Darkness games.
That's really cool. I didn't actually play a lot of the World of Darkness stuff, but
yeah, I was really into it in high school and a little bit of college. And they did a book under it's called Freak Legion. It was about the Fomori, which are like people who have been possessed by evil spirits and become like mutants. So they're like, they get power, but they're also corrupted, like physically and mentally. And normally they're the bad guys in a werewolf game. You get to, werewolf is all about kind of like protecting against the environmental apocalypse. So it's kind of like if you want to play Captain Planet, but instead got to play a pack of werewolves ripping apart mutant freaks. It's pretty awesome. So this was a game that lets you play the mutant freaks who were doomed to die.
That's and great.
It was just, it had so much, and it had so much flavor. It was like the World of Darkness books were really big on like song lyrics or movie quotes peppered throughout. And this was like, Gwar and punk bands like reference. It was all like Cannibal Corpse is like songs about murder and blood and guts. And here create a character who's like, you have like an armor plate, but you bleed constantly because it doesn't fit on your skin right. So, and you're going to probably die anyway. And it was such an original thing to come out, especially at the time. So it stuck with me, and it's great for like inspiration for when you want to come up with really messed up mutant freaky stuff, which works for D&D too. You can have aberrations or people twisted by magic, and they can like spit up
I don't know,
worms.
Josh, have we come across a whole bunch of that? Does that seem like something? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if Ben's throwing any mutants or weird shit at us.
No, yeah. I just always thought that Ben understood that I love murdering aberrations. That's what I love. Love it.
That's a solid motivator for sure. I didn't play a whole lot of the World of Darkness stuff.
Yeah, we should play Werewolf sometime. It's fun.
That'd be really cool. Josh, what about you? What's your favorite rule book or any honorable mentions that you might want to talk about?
It's really hard to say like the favorite, like I kind of want to almost say the main rule book for the Marvel role-playing game from the 1980s.
Oh my God! We could talk about that.
But like I'm not. It's more of like a fever dream type of situation. For this type of RPG, I would say my number one is actually Book of Exalted Deeds, which was kind of a later 3.5 supplement.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people would that are probably listening to this that I played are groaning at what I just said, because they're like, "What are you talking about?" Well, for those who don't know, Book of Exalted Deeds was simply stating like, here are all these additional classes you could take. Here's all these additional feats you can take. Here's additional spells you can take.
Prestige classes.
Classes.
They had prestige classes. Yeah.
Like crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. The thing is that you had to be exalted. And what exalted meant that you weren't just lawful good. Not even just being a paladin makes you exalted. There had to be things that you did.
There were
to define you as
tenets.
being,
there were tenets. You had to take tenets. Yeah, I remember.
You could, and there's certain that you could take vows, such as there's one like vow of poverty was the most broken one there was, because basically what it did said, if you eschew all material possessions, you will get all the benefits as if you were buying magic items. It's just like, okay.
It's like, so, you want an unarmed strike attack bonus being magical to punch through somebody's armor. You just, you know what, give up all your material wealth and you'll be able to do it.
So why most people would groan because you're thinking about all the min-maxers that ever use these things, their benefits. So you had like a vow of poverty monk, right? That thing could just destroy anything. All these bonuses on top of all these bonuses. But really what I liked is that up until books like that came out, when somebody wanted to power game something, it didn't require them necessarily to role play a part. And this was the first time that I saw even role players having to actually role play to designate that they're exalted.
That's the justification, right? Like it's, if you take a vow of poverty, you don't just have to like not have stuff. You have to, your character has to have a reason to take that vow.
Mm-hmm. It's just that the 3.5 was such a crunchy system that this is one thing that took that understanding, like really did good research and made it so that let's make them role play to get the crunchy. And so that's why it was my favorite. The honorable mention that I have, similar to what Ben said, is even later in 3.5. And that is the Tome of Battle, Book of the Nine Swords.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So my favorite book, because, hey, have you been playing a wizard this whole time? Wouldn't you rather that wizard could wear armor and could hit things really hard at the same time? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you like that they have that full base tap progression, but every once in a while, maybe at level 18, they just do an extra 100 damage. Not rolling dice. No, not rolling dice. Just 100 damage. Hey, here's spells in this role-playing game about rolling dice that don't involve you rolling extra dice. Isn't that great?
Static 100 damage. I'm all about it.
There's a few that do that. There's ones that I pulled up the book because I wanted to make sure I got this stuff right. But all I remember is that basically it's like, hey, these are spells. Go with it. And then they also introduced all these new feats. They came up with it's superior unarmed strike, which increased your unarmed size damage again, because up until that point, a medium-sized monk could only get up to, I don't know, gargantuan-sized fists. Now, colossal-sized fists is what they're able to get.
Because when you look at a fist, you want to be like, is it gargantuan, is it colossal? And there's a line. There's a line.
The level 6, level 8, 10, whatever monk would be, really requires to be hitting with 48s. So Tome of Battle gets the...
That's a good one.
Of the best book to be the worst.
There was still a lot of good stuff in there. So I think for me,
the Crusader was balanced. Okay, the Crusader was balanced.
For me, I'm going to start off with my honorable mention. And I think I want to see what you guys say about this. But my honorable mention is actually the 3rd edition Player's Handbook. Because when I look at the 3rd edition Player's Handbook versus the 2nd edition Player's Handbook, and I think about, I had years in 2nd edition at that point, right? I had time. I put in fucking time as a kid in
which is a lot edition. When you're that young.
I learned how to play in 2nd edition. I got to level 20 in 2nd edition before 3rd edition came out. And so 3rd edition comes out, and 3rd edition PHB, the upgrade and just the feel of the book, just the look of it. You look at like, it's this brown tome. It was the first book I ever bought that I was like, yeah, that's a tome by definition. Look it up, right? And so it's like, it's this really cool looking book, and like the artwork for, I remember seeing the lineup of the races. I remember that is one of the, like, that is something I reference to this day, is like what a dwarf looks like, what an elf looks like, what the difference between
The
a
illustration,
halfling,
you mean, right?
yeah, the halfling
Yeah.
and a gnome, like all of that stuff. But also some of my favorite artwork in the world came out of the third edition PHB, and the monster manual, like Todd Lockwood, Wayne Reynolds, like all those, like the big names in like
As
Wizards of the
I
Coast.
look at the musculature
Yeah.
of the great dragon on my wall.
Right. I have the natural history of dragons I got from Todd Lockwood Dragon Con. Yeah. So, and it's like right here. So the PHB gets my honorable mention because it flipped Dungeons and Dragons on its head and made everything so much more accessible to everyone else who wanted to play this fantastic role-playing tabletop RPG.
Yeah.
And so the PHB for third edition definitely gets my honorable mention. But my true favorite book, my true favorite tabletop RPG rule book is going to be the 5th edition Adventures in Middle Earth Player's Guide. That was made by Cubicle 7.
You don't say.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm a huge anyone who knows me is well aware that Tolkien is my homie. And so this 5th edition Adventures in Middle Earth Player's Guide is just such a fantastic supplement to Dungeons and Dragons, because I always kind of felt that Middle Earth as a setting is kind of weak, because Dungeons and Dragons is a modern war game. You take into account a lot of the idea that the characters are superhuman, that the characters are like powerful. They're supposed to be a force. Because if you look at the way like Dungeons and Dragons was an escape from normal war games. That's what it was originally. It was like you wanted to play heroes, you wanted to play a single unit, you didn't want to play like a whole battalion of characters or of creatures fighting another whole battalion of creatures. You wanted to play like one character. And so the idea is that you're playing this overpowered whatever fighter, sword fighter, wizard. Middle Earth, the dynamic is kind of flipped because the characters are supposed to be underpowered. The characters in the main, like the characters in the driver's seat, are supposed to be at the entire time intimidated by the world around them.
And they are. They are intimidated by the world around.
Yeah.
I speak from experience.
So Middle Earth as a campaign, but also like the magic in Middle Earth is a little more subtle than it is
magic? What magic?
Right. The magic in Middle Earth. Well, don't say that. You know what it does to me when you say
there's a wizard there.
You know what it does.
Not allowed to interact with the world. Whatever.
And that's the thing, is like the magic in Middle Earth is more subtle. It is pervasive. It is everywhere if you look for it. But by definition, Middle Earth would be a low magic campaign setting because it's not overt. You don't have wizards at every corner throwing fireballs and firebolts and lightning everywhere because they can. It's like, no, the magic in Middle Earth is more in the everyday nature of things kind of just happening, and the wizards are channels of that.
And also the evil monsters, because the evil monsters always seem like, all right, well, that's super not natural, and all that's ever fighting them is people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I like about this rule book is that it takes Middle Earth and it gives you a way to translate that into the Dungeons and Dragons rule set. It gives you a way to kind of say, hey, if you really want to play in Middle Earth, here's a good time frame. And it's cool because it sets you up between that 60 years between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, where it says this was a period of change. There's a lot going on in the wild. So you have this space from the Misty Mountains out to the Lonely Mountain, and everything in between, pretty much where Bilbo took his journey in The Hobbit. Like, this is a great place for some crazy things to happen in Middle Earth before the War of the Ring happens. So I always thought that was really neat. It gives you a way to kind of just, for me, I'm a huge Tolkien fan and I've always been a huge fantasy nerd. So being able to play a role-playing game in Middle Earth on tabletop is just such a neat idea. And so in the rule book, they give you rules for journeys. They say how journeys are a big part of the experience, going from place to place, and the events that happen in there are honestly more about what the adventure is about than trying to get to some end goal. And when you do actually end up getting to some climactic scene, it has to be tense. It has to be very wrought with emotion. It has to make it feel, you have to wonder all the time if the characters are going to be okay. And as a DM for that campaign setting, I really like that feeling. But yeah, so the Adventures in Middle Earth campaign setting player's guide gets my vote for my favorite RPG.
Yeah. / favorite setting.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I can't say that. We've played so much.
Huh?
You mentioned the Marvel book earlier, and I just like instantly felt like, man, I want to play that Marvel game.
Oh, I have the character waiting to go. I know exactly how he plays. I loved those characters, even though we only used them like twice.
Yeah. So we've talked about these books a little bit, and there are definitely a lot of books out there, right? There are so many books out there that could have influenced the game and what we've been pulling on. Do you guys want to talk about anything else, favorite rule book wise, before we close this out?
I mean, I could go about the 3.0 splat books if you'd like, about all that stuff in there. I love everything in there because it breaks the game in different ways.
And I know I mentioned earlier the Hero Builder's Guide. I could talk about that, the thing that helped in 3.0.
I could
build background,
fervently argue for the fact that the 4.0 Player's Handbook was the best Player's Handbook ever made.
I don't
for
know.
any game ever.
I don't think so.
I could do that.
I've never looked at it, but I don't know.
The 4th edition DMG was really good too.
Okay.
People just don't want to talk about it.
Well, this has been Roll Havoc, and it has been such a pleasure to talk to you two about all of this today. I've been so happy that we've been able to introduce the Eberron campaign that we've talked about. But this has been Jack Steelman reminding you that just because your perception roll is high, it doesn't mean that your new IKEA furniture is not a mimic. Thanks for listening.